Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the 5210 webinar, Current Pediatric Physical Activity Recommendations, presented by Dr. Sean Spooner, Family Practice Sports Medicine Physician at Unity Point Clinic, Family Medicine, Urgent Care in Urbandale. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Spooner.
Hello, thank you for having me today. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you.
Okay, good. All right, well, today I'm happy to talk about a little bit about childhood wellness and specifically activity guidelines for our children. So we'll kind of jump into that. Objectives, we're going to discuss some of the benefits of promoting childhood physical activity, discuss some of the current childhood and adolescent guidelines regarding physical activity, and then suggest ways of promoting activity amongst our youth, and then various metrics for measuring the quantity and quality of physical activity in children. So childhood, I'm sure everyone agrees, is a critical period of time for development in general, but specifically development of movement skills, learning healthy habits, establishing firm foundations for lifelong health and well-being. And for this, regular physical activity in children and adolescents is important to promote health and fitness. Why is it important? Well, in part because our children are suffering to a degree. Childhood obesity rates have tripled since the 70s, and only about 20% of adolescents report sufficient activity to meet our current relevant and aerobic muscle strengthening guidelines. Obesity actually disqualifies nearly a third of our youth from ages 17 to 24 from qualifying for military service. Current state of childhood obesity alone in America is kind of shown here. The U.S. obesity rate somewhere around 16% in 2016-17. Mississippi leads the way. Utah is the healthiest, but Iowa is sort of in the middle of the pack. The map kind of diagram here will show where each of those states kind of fit in amongst childhood obesity rates. And sadly, Iowa is starting to catch up with some of the southern states who have always historically been some of the worst off as far as childhood obesity goes. This is an interesting map that shows over time since the 80s how we have really progressed towards a greater rate of childhood obesity in general, and how that just fills in year to year is pretty staggering to me. So the benefits of physical activity. We find that higher levels of cardiovascular fitness and stronger muscles in kids who are physically active. We find lower body fat content and stronger bones. We know that this will improve our children's cognition and reduce symptoms of depression. It can improve memory, executive function, and processing speed. And it improves attention, and it improves general academic performance. It also decreases all-cause mortality over a lifetime. And so the benefits of physical activity can't be understated. This improves health in adulthood as well. They are less likely to develop chronic diseases such as heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and osteoporosis, and will enjoy an improved body composition. And really, any activity counts. We're not picky. There's really no lower threshold of benefits from physical activity. I really like this table. It kind of shows over time just the amount of activity and the hazard ratio of mortality. You'll see that almost immediately, with very little physical activity, a steep early slope towards decreased health risk and mortality risk, just with the beginning of that table on that left. Incrementally, with more activities, certainly there are greater realizations in health promotion. Most benefits are going to be obtained around 150 to 300 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. But some health benefits are immediate. And there's really no evidence that increased activities towards the end of this table show more about the benefits, particularly in children ages 6 to 13 years around cognition. You'll see that interestingly, acutely, just a burst of physical activity, they will enjoy an improved cognition. So they'll perform better in schools. This is why recess and physical activity in schools are important to just the children's functioning day to day in the academic environment. You'll notice in adults even, there's benefit from exercise and cognition, though it's more from a habitual routine of exercise than with the acute bouts of exercise we see in children. Mood, depressed mood and anxiety are improved in children with physical activity and exercise. This will be more realized with a habitual routine of exercise, so children who are routinely active will have decreased rates of depression and anxiety, where sometimes adults will enjoy more of that short-term feeling of reduced anxiety with exercise. So kind of getting into the guidelines, so just an overall view of youth physical activity guidelines defined. We recommend that children and adolescents should do 60 minutes or more of a moderate to vigorous physical activity daily. This is broken down into aerobic, muscle strengthening, and bone strengthening types of activities. So aerobic, most of that 60 minutes or more a day should be either moderate or vigorous, and should include some sort of vigorous intensity physical activity at least 3 days per week. Regarding the muscle strengthening component, as part of that 60 minutes, there should include some muscle strengthening activity on at least 3 days of the week. And then similarly, bone strengthening exercises, we recommend that 3 days of the week this be a component of the physical activity of the child. Preschool children. This is actually an age group that has been recently added to the guidelines. And so these are more recent additions, and really they're just kind of promoting getting our youngest children physically active earlier. So in preschool aged children, age 3 to 5, they should be physically active throughout the day, just to enhance their growth and development. And adult caregivers involved in the care of preschool aged children should encourage active play that includes a variety of activities. They should be encouraged to move and engage in active play. There should be structured activities such as throwing games, or encouraged to utilize tools such as bicycles or tricycles. To strengthen bones, young children should participate in activities that involve things like hopping and skipping, jumping and tumbling. A reasonable target may be 3 hours per day of activity of all intensities, ranging from light, moderate to physical activity, vigorous physical activity. Moving more towards the school-aged children. It's important to provide these young children with opportunities and encouragement to participate in physical activities that are appropriate for their ages. Similar guideline in regards to time. So ages 6 to 17-year-olds should do approximately 60 minutes again of or more of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And similar in regards to aerobic, muscle strengthening, and bone strengthening exercise, we should incorporate muscle and bone strengthening into at least 3 of the days of the week that they are active. School-age children may achieve substantial health benefits by doing moderate and vigorous physical activity for periods of time that add up to 60 minutes or more each day. It should include aerobic activity as well as age-appropriate muscle and strengthening activities. It appears that the total amount of physical activity is more important in achieving the health benefits than any one component. So just being active in general is going to be more important, say, than the frequency, intensity, or duration in this age group, or a specific mix of activities, whether it be aerobic or muscle strengthening or bone strengthening. Bone strengthening activities remain especially important for children and young adolescents because this is the time where they will see the greatest gains in bone mass production occurring during these years and just before and during puberty. And the majority of peak bone mass is obtained by the end of adolescence, and so this is really the window of opportunity for us to impact so many things long-term in adulthood, such as osteoporosis. The role of adults in this can't be understated, so adults play an important role in providing age-appropriate opportunities. We have to get our kids into into situations where they have an opportunity to be physically active in healthy ways. And so we help lay the groundwork, really an important foundation for lifelong health-promoting physical activity. We are role models. We have to lead by example. We need to encourage active play in children and encourage sustained and structured activities. So as children become adolescents, they don't start to become lazy, because this is a time in adolescence where typically just the general amount of physical activity will reduce naturally, making it all the more important for adults to provide that sort of opportunity for children and adolescents to stay involved with physical activity and enjoy opportunities to be active and encourage youth to participate. So we'll kind of get into the types of activity in more detail: aerobic, muscle strengthening, and bone strengthening. Aerobic activities involve things that rhythmically move the larger muscle groups for a sustained period of time, such as running, hopping, skipping, jumping rope, swimming, dancing, bicycling, and other things like that. They really increase cardiorespiratory fitness is the goal of aerobic activity. Muscle strengthening activities make muscles do more work than they do usually during activities of daily life. And so this is a concept called overload. So by overloading the muscles, we're basically pushing them to a limit greater than you would just doing normal daily activities. These could be unstructured or structured activities. So examples of unstructured activities are play, such as playing on a playground, climbing equipment, climbing trees safely, and playing tug of war. Structured activities would be more in line with actual weightlifting or working with resistance bands. Bone strengthening. Purpose is to produce a force on the bones of the body that promotes bone growth and strength. So the more stress that is put through a bone will help promote that bone to grow stronger over time. Commonly produced by impact with the ground in most situations, such as, again, running, jumping, playing basketball, tennis, hopscotch, young kids. All examples of bone strengthening activities that are part of normal play. As these examples illustrate, bone strengthening activities can also be aerobic and muscle strengthening at the same time. Patterns of activity. So in children, you're going to see the pattern of activity more in line with intermittent bursts of activity during free play. They're kind of off and on and off. Adolescents will still have that sort of pattern of activity, but they're going to begin more of a sustained approach to activity as well. And that would be more in line with sports and organized structured activities such as team sports. The amount of physical activity done by girls tends to decrease dramatically compared to that of boys, and the disparity will persist into adulthood. Intensity of activity. Children and adolescents can meet these guidelines by doing a combination of moderate and vigorous intensity aerobic physical activities, or by doing only vigorous intensity activities alone. They should not do only moderate intensity activities. We should really encourage some component of that activity to be vigorous intensity. As we find it will lead to a greater improvement in overall cardiorespiratory fitness over time. The intensity of aerobic physical activity can be defined on either an absolute or relative scale. Either scale could be used to monitor the intensity of aerobic physical activity. Absolute intensity is the amount of energy expended during the activity, but without considering a person's respiratory fitness. So an absolute aerobic intensity would be defined in terms of METs, or metabolic equivalents of task. The ratio of the rate of energy expended during activity to the rate of energy expended at rest is the definition of a MET. For example, 1 MET is the rate of energy expenditure while at rest. So just existing, you're expending 1 MET. 4 METs of activity would expend 4 times the energy used at rest. And so if a person does a 4 MET activity for 30 minutes, they have done 4 times 30, or 120 MET minutes, or 2 MET hours of activity. And a person could also achieve 120 MET minutes by doing an 8 MET activity for 15 minutes. So the higher the intensity of the activity, the faster you can get to a net goal of that particular activity. Light intensity activities will be defined as walking non-sedentary behaviors of less than 3 minutes. For example, walking at 2 miles per hour requires about 2.5 minutes of energy expenditure and is therefore considered a light intensity activity. Or a moderate intensity activity would be defined as something between 3 to 5.9 minutes. And so walking at 3 miles per hour would require about 3.5 minutes of expenditure, and so therefore is considered a moderate intensity activity. And then a vigorous intensity activity would be defined as 6 or more minutes. And so example of running a mile in 10 minutes at 6 miles per hour is a 10-minute activity and would be classified as vigorous. The relative intensity uses a person's level of cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory fitness to assess the level of effort. And so it describes a person's level of effort relative to his or her fitness. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is the highest level of effort, where sitting is 0 and the highest level of effort is 10. Moderate intensity activity is 5 to 6 and would indicate an increased heart rate and respiration. And a vigorous intensity activity begins at a level of 7 or 8 and indicates a much higher elevation of heart rate and respiration. And so putting them together and then defining intensity of activity, moderate intensity would be an absolute scale of 3 to 5.9 minutes, or a relative scale of 5 or 6 on a scale of 0 to 10. And a vigorous activity would be an absolute scale of 6 or more minutes, or a relative scale beginning at 7 or 8 out of a 0 to 10 scale. The talk test is useful as a rule of thumb. The person doing moderate intensity aerobic activity can talk but not sing during the activity, and a person doing vigorous intensity activity cannot say more than a few words without pausing to breathe. I've included a couple tables to go over some more specific opportunities for achieving a moderate intensity aerobic activity in different ages of children. So for example, preschool age children could achieve this by playing games such as tag or follow the leader, playing on a playground, riding a tricycle, bicycle, walking, skipping, jumping, swimming, and other activities such as that. Where school age children are going to do similar activities, but also add in some more structured play and sport activities. Adolescents, again, adding more structured activity, but in that similar sort of scale of exercise. More vigorous intensity aerobic activities are listed here, but include more of the running, jumping, kind of a cross-training approach. Sports, again, are going to generally enter more into the vigorous intensity types of activities. For muscle strengthening and bone strengthening, I've included some examples of activities that would meet those types of activities, such as muscle strengthening in young kids, again, tug of war, climbing, tumbling, doing gymnastics type exercises, school-aged kids, climbing a rope, climbing a tree, climbing playground equipment, and then adolescents more with actual structured weightlifting, resistance bands, weight machines, and structured sports. Similarly, with bone strengthening, you see that a lot of the muscle strengthening and bone strengthening activities sort of mirror each other in many respects. American youth vary in their physical activity participation. Some don't participate at all, and others participate in enough activity to meet the key guidelines without much effort, and some exceed the key guidelines. One practical strategy to promote activity in youth is to replace sedentary behavior with activity whenever possible. For example, wherever appropriate and safe, young children should walk or bicycle to school or the bus stop instead of riding in a car. Rather than only watching sports activities on TV, encourage young people to participate in age-appropriate sports or games. For those that are not meeting the guidelines, we recommend that they should slowly increase their moderate to vigorous physical activity in small steps and in ways that they enjoy. A gradual increase in activity in the number of days and the time spent being active will help reduce the risk of injury. Meeting guidelines, those children should continue to do moderate to vigorous physical activity every day and, if appropriate, become even more active. Evidence suggests that even more than 60 minutes of activity daily will provide additional health benefits for school-aged children. And those who are exceeding the guidelines should maintain their activity level and vary the kinds of activities they do to reduce overtraining and overuse injuries. Special considerations should be made for children and adolescents with disabilities. So these children are more likely to be inactive in general than those without disabilities, because logistically it just takes more steps and more effort to necessarily find opportunities for these children to be active in stuff like this. They should work with a healthcare professional or physical activity specialist to understand the types and amounts of activity that are appropriate for them. And when possible, they should meet the key guidelines laid out above. They should be as active as possible and avoid being inactive as much as possible. So what's the relationship between bout duration and physical activity and health outcomes? Historically, physical activity recommendations have traditionally focused on moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity performed in a continuous manner, such as in continuous active exercise. In the 90s, the focus shifted really to accumulating physical activity throughout the day, but in bouts as short as 10 minutes. In the early 2000s, physical activity guidelines for Americans had included the guidance that activity needed to last 10 minutes in order to count. But research continues to support the conclusion that physical activity accumulated in bouts of at least 10 minutes can improve a variety of health-related outcomes. But in addition, more recent research has indicated that bouts of any length of moderate to vigorous physical activity will contribute to health benefits associated with the accumulated volume of physical activity. So this new evidence really justified the current guidelines and guidance that moderate to vigorous activity of any duration counts toward meeting the key guidelines. How are steps considered? Steps are basic unit of locomotion and provided an easy-to-understand metric of ambulation. So how many steps have you taken today? And measuring steps counts combined with goal setting, like a target goal of steps per day, and other behavioral approaches have been shown to increase physical activity levels. I'm sure a lot of you have smart watches and devices. I do, and I can look, and it will tell me immediately how many steps I've taken today. And if my goal is a certain number of steps, say 10,000 steps a day, and I'm not there yet, just knowing the number of steps I've taken that day will encourage me to go and walk more steps because I'm sort of, type A, and I have to meet my step goal in order to feel satisfied. I think that's the key that they're putting out there. Is steps are a very easy way of promoting activity just by making people more aware. Steps counts are generally measured with wearable devices. So a pedometer is measured number of steps, where accelerometers will measure steps and intensity. And many of our devices include both of those internally. Expanding research and advances in technological approaches for measuring physical activity have led to examinations of the association of step counts with healthy outcomes. Research evidence on the influence of incremental increases in the number of steps per day on outcomes is limited, but it's expanding. Popular advice is 10,000 steps a day, but there's no specific evidence yet that says that's the key number. It's an easy number and seems appropriate and attainable by most people, and so that's the number that most people are popularly advised to obtain. And I had to put a busy slide in here about safety, because I think it's important to remember that to do physical activity safely and reduce risk of injuries and other adverse events, we should do the following. Understand the risks, yet be confident that physical activity can be safe for almost everyone. Choose types of physical activity that are appropriate for their current fitness level and health goals, because some activities are safer than others. Increase physical activity gradually over time to meet key guidelines or health goals. And inactive people should start slow and go slow by starting with lower intensity activities and gradually increasing how often and how long they perform those activities over time. They should protect themselves by using appropriate gear and sports equipment, choosing safe environments, following rules and policies, and making sensible choices about when, where, and how to be active. And be under the care of a health care provider if they have chronic conditions or symptoms. People with chronic conditions and symptoms can consult a healthcare professional or physical activity specialist about the types and amounts of activities that are appropriate for them. I wanted to add in a few slides to talk about overuse and burnout. I'm a sports medicine physician, and I see a lot of kids who come in with a variety of overuse injuries, and frankly, burnout as well. And this is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, we've got the kids who are really, we're focusing on just getting active and meeting the guidelines. Then we've got another set of children, especially in, I would say, probably everywhere, but I became more aware of it acutely when I started to, when I moved to Des Moines, when I had gotten out of the military and moved back. I had grown up in a small town. We just had a single sport at any given time. Everyone participated, but you didn't do more than one team. You didn't do more than one sport at a time. Anymore, a lot of these kids will participate in multiple teams and multiple sports simultaneously. Youth sport participation does offer many benefits, including the development of self-esteem, peer socialization, and general fitness. However, an emphasis on competitive success, often driven by goals of elite level travel team selection, collegiate scholarships, Olympic and national team membership, and even professional contracts has seemingly become widespread. This has resulted in increased pressure to begin high-intensity training at young ages, and such an excessive focus on early intensive training and competition at young ages rather than skill development can lead to overuse injury and burnout. A slide on overuse. So these kids are growing and developing, and their bones and growth plates are still in active development, and so they're at risk for injuries, real injuries that can be both acutely pertinent and also chronically important to understand. It's interesting that their age-adjusted bone density is actually low right before the beginning of puberty because there's a difference between just their overall growth and vertical increase in height. Amenorrhea, if chronic, can be a complicating feature for overuse, especially in regards to stress fractures and bone density. Temporary amenorrhea in certain sports is tolerable, but those athletes who experience chronic amenorrhea from a persistent high level of activity are at greater risk over time. Intensity and volume training errors. So basically, bigger, faster, stronger programs that focus on intensity and volume of activity, but may suffer from lack of appropriate design and oversight can cause overuse injuries in our children. Simply overscheduling. Too many practices, too many teams with multiple practices, workouts, and competition overlapping can contribute to overuse injury. And then children who are in multiple sports and teams. It's not wrong, but it just needs to be made aware of that paying attention to these type of things may help you be able to plan ahead and periodize the activity of the child so that they can reduce the risk of overuse. Also, in regards to readiness for sport. So not every child is ready for sport just because of their age. Different kids at different ages and different grade levels will develop a readiness for a more advanced sport at a different time. And that should be individualized and recognized and observed for. Also, I would caution against sport specialization. There's a myriad of evidence out there that shows that the best athletes in the world, the professionals that we watch on TV, did not specialize in their sport. A very small percentage of them specialized in their sport until much later in their adolescent and collegiate lives. Also, those who have a prior history of injury will be at risk for overuse injuries. Those with difficulty, issues with alignment, biomechanics, flexibility, will be at greater use of overuse. And equipment sizing is important. Our children grow fast, and as they grow, we are tempted to push the limits of how long they should stay in their particular equipment because it's expensive to go and buy new equipment all the time. But be careful because that can lead to a greater injury risk. And then burnout, overtraining, high training volumes, high training demands, high time demands will wear our children out. And it's something that can slowly creep up on a family. I think when they're just so stuck in, it's almost in tunnel vision. They just go, 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 especially if there's more than one child in the family involved in activities. And being cognizant to slow down, pull back, and allow for rest. And sometimes rest is a dirty word in a lot of the sports that I cover and watch. But I think it's important to make sure that we incorporate periods of rest into the training program. Burnout can come from performance expectations, whether it's self-induced or external. Our children believe that they should perform at a very high level. And if they don't, then that's causing personal stress upon them and can lead to burnout. Frequent intense competition, inconsistent coaching practices can also contribute. Little personal control and sport decision making. I've seen this. It's almost living through your child, where some parents or families will, they're a baseball family, so my kid's going to play baseball. But it may not be personally what they're the most interested in doing, but they might want to please the family and the parent and a coach or a teacher by going with it. And I think making sure we communicate with our children and understand what their personal goals and wishes are important in preventing burnout and just promoting a healthy family environment. Also, negative performance evaluations. There is impact on negative performance in criticisms that aren't constructive. Perfectionism. A lot of our children are perfectionists. They want to be high achievers, and that is a good trait, but should be tempered by good coaching and good parenting to ensure that they aren't putting undue stress upon themselves and unrealistic goals. The need to please others, similarly. Non-assertiveness. A unidimensional self-conceptualization, so focusing only on their athletic involvement. I do take care of some athletes who this is their life. They do nothing but gymnastics, hours and hours and hours a week. And it almost becomes their identity. And so when they become injured, it is a deep personal injury to them, more so than just the musculoskeletal injury. So again, an opportunity to maintain mental health in these high-achieving athletes. Sometimes they have low self-esteem, even if they appear to be very confident. And so I think just continuing to have good communication with our children is important. And then a high perception of stress, high anxiety, can lead to burnout. So in summary, we want to promote exercise and its healthy benefits. We're discovering more health benefits all the time from exercise. Move more, sit less. Any activity amount of activity has some health benefits, and so just getting out and moving of our children, being them active, is going to help them short-term and long-term. There are immediate health benefits for sure, and there are even more long-term health benefits. Added a few references. Mostly borrowed a lot of this from the CDC because they have such a great set of activity guidelines and recommendations and tools out there. So I would encourage you to visit that document and visit the site because, boy, it's just a one-stop shop for a ton of great actionable information for us to use as healthcare providers and child advocates. So that is it. I'm happy to answer questions if that's the format or respond in any other way to you. But I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Spinner. If anyone has questions, feel free to chime in or write it in the chat box. If not, we'll be signing off.